smokes!
Hey there, I'm Nikki Novak, and welcome to RT Essentials. When it comes to action movies, do you have tunnel vision? If so, then this episode is just the ticket, because today we're breaking down some of the hottest scenes to ever hit the railroad track. Yes, the railroad track. We're talking trains of all shapes, colors, sizes, carrying anything from people to animals to vintage cars, toxic chemicals, you name it, we don't shame it. If it looks like a train and chugs like a train, choo-choo, then it counts as a train. There is one caveat. The train must be in motion. Locomotion, that is. But that is it. That's where we draw the line. Full steam ahead, these are the best train action sequences. On top of a bullet train fight, the Wolverine. Up first is the on top of a bullet train fight scene from the Wolverine Marvel's 6th X-Men installment. The film follows our favorite retractable clawed superhero Logan, aka Wolverine, who finds himself in Tokyo, forced to go on the run with a powerful industrialist daughter and pushed to his physical and emotional brink. Logan can't catch a break, and this time he's managed to upset the Yakuza. For this scene, director James Mangold and his crew had to simulate a train reaching speeds of almost 200 miles per hour, which was no easy feat. VFX company Weta Digital, founded by Peter Jackson, filmed the background on a Tokyo freeway, building a rig that consisted of 8 Red Epic cameras attached to a van to get as much high-resolution coverage as possible. The crew then drove the van down the freeway at a constant speed of 60 kilometers. This sounds like the movie Speed, which meant that in post they could speed up the footage to achieve the fast-moving effect the scene required. For the fighting on the train's roof, the actors were filmed on top of a set piece, hanging on wires and surrounded by a green screen. And of course, they needed lots of fans to simulate the intense wind, but I think they were really just testing the strength of Hugh Jackman's hair gel, which is as strong as his nails in those films, ladies and gentlemen, as far as I'm concerned. Train versus helicopter, Mission Impossible. Take an action sequence on a train to even greater heights? You add Tom Cruise and you add a helicopter, and that's exactly what director Brian De Palma did in the train versus helicopter scene from the first Mission Impossible film. Surely you must have known that Tom Cruise would find his way onto this list. The guy just loves finding new ways to put his body on the line. For this movie, Cruise's character Ethan Hunt goes on a covert assignment that takes a disastrous turn when he becomes the prime suspect in a murder. Ethan must then fight to prove his innocence, literally, which culminates in his death-defying scene aboard the TGV train to Paris. Interestingly enough, De Palma had the idea for a train sequence before he had put the film together, even a plot for the film, even mapping out how such a difficult scene would be shot prior to considering how the scene itself might fit into the actual movie. According to Cruise, him and De Palma would sit there with train cars, and they didn't have the story because there was no story, but both agreed it was a very cool idea. But how exactly was this seemingly impossible mission made possible? Unsurprisingly, TGV rail authorities wanted no part in this dangerous scheme, but Cruise managed to get permission to shoot some of the exterior shots on top of their fastest train. For all the other shots, the crew filmed under a controlled situation on a soundstage in London, with the actors performing their stunts on top of life-size train models against a blue screen. Cruise acquired the only machine in Europe, of course he did, that could simulate winds of up to 140 miles per hour so that his face would accurately distort. What's a Tom Cruise movie without a little facial distortion at this point? We've come to expect it from him. And the rest of the effects were completed by Industrial Light and Magic, who used a mix of CG, miniature models, and projection mapping. A lot of time, money, and effort went into this one sequence, but you can't put a price on great action flicks. Actually, yeah, you can. The film grossed over $457 million, so I'll say it was worth it. The Stanton curve, unstoppable. Unstoppable is the perfect title for a film about an unmanned locomotive that roars out of control and features the Stanton Curve sequence, where a CSX 8888 train narrowly clears the sharp turn of a viaduct and avoids a derailment. Unlike Mission Impossible, there was no need for director Tony Scott and screenwriter Mark Baumbach to craft a plot that incorporates a train scene, because not only is this entire film mostly set on a train, but it's also based on a true story. You might have heard of the real-life Crazy Eights incident, where a train of 47 cars, 22 of which were fully loaded, ran uncontrolled at speeds of over 50 miles per hour for almost 2 hours. Oh yeah, a couple of those cars also contained thousands of gallons of molten phenol, a severely toxic chemical that could unleash imaginable harm if the train were to crash in a populated area. I bet Cruise was mad he didn't think of that one. There's always time, Cruise, there's always time. In Unstoppable, Denzel Washington plays Frank Barnes, a veteran railroad engineer who risks his life to stop the train, assisted by a young conductor named Will Coulson, played by Chris Pine. Barnes and Coulson anticipate the Stanton curve, implementing the independent air brake and reducing speed just enough to keep the train from flying off the track. Scott insisted on using real locomotives, borrowing from the Canadian Pacific Railway, Wheeling and Lake Erie Railway, and the Southwest Pennsylvania Railroad. For the Stanton Curve sequence, where the train tilts on 2 wheels, some CG was required and the surrounding fuel tanks were added with VFX to raise the stakes. Scott's dedication to authenticity earned him critical praise, with Roger Ebert calling the film superb, and the New York Times writing that Scott creates an unexpectedly rich world of chugging, rushing trains slicing across equally beautiful industrial and natural landscapes. Sadly, this would be the last film Scott would direct before his death in 2012, but it proved to be a profound bookend to an unstoppable career. Blackout fight, Snowpiercer.
Precisely 74% of you shall die. My friend, you suffer from the misplaced optimism of the doomed. This is going to be good.
The blackout fight scene from Bong Joon-ho's sci-fi film Snowpiercer is nothing short of terrifying. Actually, the film's entire premise is terrifying. Imagine an ice age caused by global warming, then that forces humanity's last survivors to board a world-spanning super train, with the elites ruthlessly controlling the lower-class passengers, who are forced to the tail section of the train. If you're at all claustrophobic, I'd avoid watching this one. During the blackout fight sequence, the train, known as Snowpiercer, enters a tunnel, causing complete darkness at the worst possible time, right smack in the middle of an all-out rebellion. The tail mob progresses forward after realizing that the guards are carrying weapons with no ammunition. But when things go dark, only the guards are equipped with night vision, so they begin slaughtering the blinded rebels with melee weapons. Yeah, the apocalypse wasn't enough. Let's squeeze all of humanity into one narrow vehicle, then turn the lights off and give the angry guards axes and night vision goggles. Bong Joon-ho really knows how to stress out his audience. Please refer to Parasite for further evidence of that. Most of Snowpiercer was shot on a set at Barrandov Studios in Prague, with the crew building a 100-meter train replica. A giant gyroscopic gimbal was used to give a three-dimensional feel to the train, and Joon-ho wanted audiences to have a sense that whichever way the shot is moving, that's where the characters are going. And he really pulled it off. The film is a bumpy ride. You constantly feel like you're in motion and part of the action. I kinda liked it, not gonna lie. Though Snowpiercer was a massive technical achievement for Joon-ho and his crew, one of the hardest parts of filming was trying to hide Chris Evans' muscles. Evans' character, Curtis Everett, was a revolutionary type, supposedly on the verge of starvation, which didn't exactly line up with his Captain America physique, shall we say? But thankfully, the nifty costume department worked their magic and kept Evans' superhero bod in check. God, I always have to keep my bod in check. It's so tough. I so feel for him. Bond excavates a train, Skyfall. Skyfall was the 23rd film in the James Bond series, the third to star Daniel Craig in the leading role of 007. And as far as I know, the first to feature a 2-ton caterpillar digger on top of a locomotive. I'm talking about the scene where Bond excavates a train while fighting with a mercenary named Patrice, who has stolen a hard drive containing precious information about undercover agents. The scene has it all: motorcycles, cars, trains, shootouts, fistfights, M yelling at Moneypenny, Bond taking time to adjust his cuffs after being shot in the chest, because, you know, he's got his priorities straight. And of course, Bond operating an excavator to rip open and jump into one of the train carriages in pursuit of Patrice. All without breaking a sweat. Director Sam Mendes and his crew had their work cut out for them, but instead of relying heavily on CGI or massive models like many other modern actioners do, Mendes went with a more traditional approach. Production shot on location in Adana, Turkey, and captured this train sequence on a real speeding train, with Craig and co-star Ola Rapace attached to safety wires chugging along at 40 miles per hour. The two actors performed most of their own stunts, which is impressive considering the intense physicality required for this sequence. Okay, the shot where Bond dives backwards off a 300-foot viaduct and crashes into the water was actually Craig's stunt double, Andy Lister, who was attached to a safety line. But that's only because Craig didn't want to get his suit wet. Again, priorities. He needed a cocktail at that point. Curving bullets on a train, Wanted. Next up is the curving bullets on a train scene from the 2008 thriller Wanted, directed by Timur Bekmambetov. The film finds Wesley Gibson, an office worker who follows in his murdered father's footsteps by joining a secret society of assassins. Gibson is recruited by Fox, played by Angelina Jolie, and along with the help of the society's leader Sloane, played by Morgan Freeman, Gibson is able to tap into his previously dormant powers. Gibson has been conditioned to kill Cross, a rogue assassin who has left the secret society, and after the two have an unexpected shootout, Gibson traces a bullet and manages to eventually track Cross down. The two face off once again on a speeding train, and this is when we see some serious curving bullet action. The car is filled with pedestrians, so Gibson and Cross have to find clever ways to shoot around the innocent passengers, so they fire their weapons sidearm, putting a spin on the bullets akin to a slice in tennis. I call that an ace. The bullets bullets collide and cancel each other out, which happens with many shots in this scene. By the way, the odds of two bullets colliding in midair, even one time, are extremely low, but we will definitely suspend disbelief. It is a movie after all, and a fun one. While we're busy computing the physics of curving and colliding bullets, Fox drives her car into the train, causing a derailment as the train crosses a narrow bridge. To avoid spoilers, I won't reveal what happens next between Gibson and Cross, but it's something like the Luke and Darth Vader reveal. Too much information? Anyone? Anyone? I am your father. For this sequence, several full-size L-train cars were built on a green screen stage with a pedalino car constructed on a hydraulic gimbal that could rotate and tilt to simulate the train flipping. Also, most of the actors performed their own stunts in this film, but we'd expect nothing less from Jolie, who famously performs an estimated 99% of her own stunts, just 1% behind Tom Cruise. The train heist, Fast 5.
We're being robbed! Whatever happens, don't stop the train!
Any action-packed episode is not complete without at least one Fast and Furious scene. This time, it's the train heist from Fast 5, directed by Justin Lin and released in 2011. Vin Diesel, Jordana Brewster, and the late Paul Walker star in their iconic roles as street racing criminals. This time, they're on the run from authorities and find themselves in Rio de Janeiro, where they attempt to steal 3 cars from a train. I don't know if you've ever tried to steal a car from a moving train, but I can assure you it's very difficult, especially when that train is filled with DEA agents and armed henchmen. But hey, if anybody can do it, it's Vin. Thanks to the franchise's proven success, Fast 5 was given a hefty budget of $125 million. But just this one train sequence ended up costing over $25 million to produce, which, put into perspective, is more than what it cost to make films like A Quiet Place and Parasite, and roughly what it cost to make The Grand Budapest Hotel and La La Land. Yes, none of these movies feature Vin Diesel propelling a Corvette out of a speeding train just seconds before it crashes and explodes. But still, that is a lot of cheese for one scene. Though this sequence did rely on CGI, much of it was filmed practically. Production actually purchased part of a working railroad and the necessary trains to boot. At least 12 replicas of this Chevy Corvette Roadster were ordered from an Ohio-based builder, and 5 of those were stunt cars, 3 of which were shot from an air cannon out of the train into the lake. It took 3 weeks to capture this scene, shooting in Rice, California, which sits at the southern tip of the Mojave Desert. If those cars are still there, could I excavate them now? Because I love me a Corvette. It was an ambitious undertaking for Lin and his crew, but all worthwhile because Fast ended up grossing over $666 million at the box office. Runaway Train, Spider-Man 2. One of the most revered superhero films to date, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 features the runaway train scene where Spider-Man faces off with supervillain Dr. Octopus on the top of an elevated subway car filled with civilians. Doc Ock grows increasingly annoyed with Spidey's relentless pursuit and decides to take out the conductor, increase the train's speed, and cut the brakes before uttering, "You have a train to catch," then ejecting himself from the situation. Really, Doc? Couldn't you be more like that human-loving octopus in My Octopus Teacher? Love him. Spider-Man's mask is damaged from a small explosion, and he's forced to take it off, revealing Peter Parker. This is important because Spidey had been wrongfully deemed a masked menace by the city, and now he was exposed, just a kid faced with the extraordinary task of stopping this train and its passengers from crashing.
You have a train to catch.
Using all of his strength and powers, he manages to latch his webs to the surrounding buildings and halts the train just feet before it plummets into the river below. The enormous effort drains Parker. He falls unconscious, only to be gently carried away by the train's passengers, who express their gratitude for his heroic actions. It's one of the most beautiful scenes in the film, only to be ruined when Doc Ock crashes back onto the train, terrorizing everyone yet again. Much of the scene was shot with CGI, which you can kind of tell, but as any native New Yorker will be eager to point out, nothing is as fake as having above-ground subways running through Midtown Manhattan. Just doesn't exist. Circus Train Chase, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Anybody out there suffer from ophidiophobia, i.e. an overwhelming fear of snakes? If so, you should probably avoid watching the Circus Train Chase from The Last Crusade, the third installment in the Indiana Jones franchise. This scene was set in 1912 and featured River Phoenix as a 13-year-old Indiana who steals a golden crucifix from a group of grave robbers and gets chased on horseback across the countryside. The angry mob catches up to Indy in their cars, and Indy is forced to leap from his horse onto a moving circus train. The men follow him on board, and Indy jumps from car to car, eventually coming face to face with an anaconda and then landing in a vat containing hundreds of smaller snakes. My worst nightmare ever. Spielberg shot this sequence in Colorado on the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad and used the Denver and Rio Grande 484 steam engine, which was repainted as the fictional Pueblo and Chama Railroad. The car chase and horse transfer shots were filmed just south of Antonio, where an actual road runs alongside the railroad, so the crew had to use dirt and brush to cover up said road. As for the train's interiors, Spielberg shot on set at Universal Studios Hollywood. Oh, nothing like an easy soundstage. Part of what makes this prologue so compelling is Phoenix's performance, perfectly encapsulating Indiana, his look, his charm, his propensity for mischief. Ford himself even recommended Phoenix for the part, which was quite a hat tip, or fedora tip, I should say. Batman vs. Ra's al Ghul train fight, Batman Begins.
Pressure's moving along the mains, blowing all the pipes. And if that pressure reaches us, the water supply right across the whole city is gonna blow.
And last, but certainly not least, is the Batman vs. Ra's al Ghul train fight from Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. In the film, a young Bruce Wayne travels to the Far East and trains with the League of Shadows led by Ra's al Ghul. Everything is going as planned. Bruce is learning ninjutsu, he's practicing his fears, bonding with his mentor, so what's the catch? Well, Bruce discovers that the League of Shadows believes that killing is necessary and that Gotham City is beyond saving and must be destroyed. I mean, the name League of Shadows is pretty shady, so maybe you should have seen it coming, just saying. Regardless, Bruce burns down the League's temple and escapes, supposedly killing Ra's al Ghul in the process. So when Batman and Ra's finally face off again during the film's climax on the train, the tension is extra high.
Familiar, don't you have anything new? How about this?
Nolan has always preferred using traditional methods and shooting things in camera as much as possible, but for the monorail sequence, he needed to combine miniature models, CGI, and live-action footage to achieve the desired effect. For the interiors, the crew built 2 full-size train carriages, and shot on a large 360 green screen stage. Bale and Neeson had properly rehearsed for their fight, which allowed Nolan to rapidly run the scene over and over, setting up the camera in various positions for full coverage. Nolan's work was met with critical praise, and Batman Begins is often cited as one of the most influential films of the 2000s. And that concludes our list of the best train action sequences. Of course, we couldn't include every scene that fits the bill. Far, far too many trains, too little time, but fear not, there's plenty of episodes of RT Essentials coming your way, so I'm sure we'll get there eventually. Choo-choo! Thanks for tuning in. I'm Nikki Novak, and one more thing about trains. It doesn't matter where they're going. What matters is deciding to get on board.